Well, that was pretty cool. I mean, we were just finished filming one podcast episode, and you had to do an interview with Jim Cramer.
That that was super fun, and I did it in my full broadcast or podcast gear.
Yep.
And he was asking me, "Where are you broadcasting from?" And I told him, "Hey, I'm in my volcano lair." There's actually some old history with Jim. I was on his show back in '04, back when all the critics were saying that I was running an evil criminal organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told him that's why I have a volcano lair. It's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, retort. Well, if I'm a villain, gotta have a lair.
But I think he may have just renamed the lair, didn't he?
I think so. He said, "Well, it's good to have you coming in from the Batcave," which I actually like better because, truth be told, Batman is my favorite superhero because he's got the coolest toys.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a little bit. His toys are cool. They've got that villain twist. The villains, the bad guys don't really get the best gear, but Batman, he's a techie. He doesn't kill people. He's always got some interesting way to subdue them with the bat cable or the bat plane. And he too has a bat cave.
Does that make me Robin? Do I get to be Robin in this?
I think so. We'll have to. I think we've got Halloween figured out for us this year, Mike.
All right, let's get episode 8 started then.
All right, let's get it in the can. Here we go.
Risk. The final frontier. These are the stories of the Axon enterprise. Our mission to protect life, to seek amazing people, and live epic tales. Come, let us boldly go.
Well, when we last left our heroes, that's a little loud.
It is, but I love the music.
You do love it. You made that with AI, so I know you love your work.
All right, we'll bring the volume down to 0. We're gonna fade. All right,
that's what I can hear now. When we last left our heroes, they were coming off an exciting run with their IPO where it shot up, and then because of some things that happened with United Airlines, if you listen to episode 7, then the stock starts to tank. So, Rick, what is that a reference to, by the way?
The old Batman.
The old Batman.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna
the serial, what do they call them? Serial operas or soap serial or something?
Well, if we rename this the Batcave, then we'll have to have a lot of Star Trek references, obviously. And by the way, we have an AMA running. We'll ask some questions at the end of the episode. And one question that said, "Can you please shoehorn in more Star Trek references?" And if we start calling this the Batcave, we'll have to shoehorn in some Batman references.
Do you think that was negative sarcasm?
No. There's smiley faces. There's emojis. I think people like
cool.
that.
The emojis can make a big difference.
They do make a big difference. Okay, so when episode 7, we actually spent the entire episode talking about a very brief but a very important part of the history of TASER, which is the IPO. So let's start episode 8 today, talking about coming out of that IPO.
Yeah. All right. So the IPO, when I remember May 8th was the day we raised $10 million, and that's the day we began trading on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And we talked about how United Airlines really had led some of the story of who the company was and this run in our stock price. And of course, it went up. I think it peaked around $22 and then went down. I think it got as low as like $3.
When it peaked at $22, again, startup, small scrappy team, you've had layoffs, funded by your father and a friend, and now you go public, and now it's at $22. Are you like, let's go buy some Lamborghinis? Or are you like...
Funny story, you should say that, actually. Yeah, my dad and I went out, we bought a Lamborghini Gallardo together. One of the challenges, though, was the stock was up. And then when it came cratering down, I hadn't fully paid the taxes I was going to owe on some of the shares that I sold. So yeah, that was a case where personally the stock being down was pretty painful when the tax man came a knocking.
I actually didn't know that you went out and bought a Lamborghini. I just thought that would be funny to say that you guys all run out. Like, this is the first thing that came to my mind. Like, when you get a lot of money, what does one go do?
Look, I grew up in the 80s. Yeah, we have the same birthday, May 20th, for viewers who want to send us cards.
And by the way, I'd like to give you a shout out, Rick. As long as we've known each other, this is the first year I think you actually remember that I shared the birthday, and you wished me a happy birthday before I actually wished you a happy birthday. Like that, I feel like I really made it this year.
Well, for years I couldn't remember my wife's birthday because I get in my own head. It's either the 11th or the 12th. So anyway, yeah. Happy. It was fun to wish you the first happy birthday this year, Mike.
Yep.
So what was I talking about
You
birthdays?
ran out and bought Lamborghinis.
Yeah, I grew up in the 80s with the Lamborghini Countach poster. And I think it was Paulina Poroskova, the model who's the beautiful woman on the beautiful car. And I used to look at that and fantasize like one day I'm going to own a Lamborghini. And so, yeah, after we went public, Dad and I split one. And that was a pretty cool moment.
Nice. And then the stock tanks.
Then the stock tanks. And again, the thing I'm kind of proud of is that we didn't get distracted with the stock being down. And we weren't overly focused on running around chasing airline business. We were working on this device, what would become the X26. Because what we heard from our customers was they loved the TASER M26, but they said it was just too big and bulky. So they wouldn't wear it on their belt. They'd leave it in the trunk of the car. And we were really focused on what could we do to make this thing smaller. And it actually, there's a lot of R&D that went into this. We developed what we called shaped pulse technology. And what that was basically with the M26, we'd have one big pulse of energy and we'd have to get it up to 50,000 volts. So it would jump across the air gap and through the clothing into the body. With the X26, we came up with this more refined approach, a very sophisticated sort of two-phase electrical pulse where we'd hit with a very small amount of high voltage. And then once we broke through the clothing, like the little lightning bolt, like you see when it comes from the sky, when that lightning comes down, the resistance drops to zero. It's almost like in that moment, a wire is connecting the cloud to the ground. That same thing could happen with the X26. So we didn't have to lift all of the energy in each pulse to 50,000 volts of energy. We could just send a small pulse to break through, and then the rest of the current could follow. That reduced the power requirements by something like 80%. And that's what allowed this weapon to become so small, cops started complaining that the handle was too small. And by the way, that was intentional. We did that because everybody was complaining that the M26 was too big. And we figured, well, let's make it so small that they'll have to buy a grip extender. And if they're complaining it's too small, they then can't also complain it's too big. And that actually worked like a champ.
Yeah. And what's I know there's a story behind it. There's always a story behind these things. The difference in the naming between the M26 and the X26.
Yeah. So this is a case where the name just sort of stuck from R&D. We actually try to avoid that happening now. We try to give products really lame names when they're in research and development, so it just doesn't become habit. But there was the M26, and then because we were in R&D, a lot of times, in the military, again, where we're trying to take some inspiration, they'll talk about X programs as being secret research projects. And so the successor to the M26 was the X26, and we just fell in love with the name, and so it stuck.
You like the letter X, and that's how it stuck. It's a pretty cool letter.
Yeah.
And back to the electricity part. So, this is 2003 when it's released, but still, you were growing. You had the M26 leading into the X26. Were there concerns from the public and from others that you built this gun that electrocutes people, which is not the case, but is
not yet. In the early days, almost all of the press was positive. When you're there's no point in beating up on a startup that nobody's heard of. One thing I learned, and we'll come to it, once you are successful, it puts a big target on your back, and that's when the negative press started. But early on, the stories were generally very positive. Here's these two brothers, Tom and I, had started the business with a goal of making the bullet obsolete and saving lives. And so most of the stories were really positive.
I have to tell you, I don't follow. I have a pretty thick skin as well, especially being here at TASER now, Axon, as long as I have. I don't read the negative press. Like they can say what they want to. Like we know we're on a righteous mission. But man, that just as we referenced at the beginning of the podcast, watching that interview with Jim Cramer on Mad Money, and you've been with him. He's been with you along this journey for a long time. It does restore your confidence in some folks that are out there in the media who see what you're doing and believe in what you're doing and have faith in what you're doing, and then they tell that story.
Yeah, Jim Cramer's been great over the years. Look, didn't always love him in 2004 because he was putting some more critics on air. There was a New York Times reporter who was just bashing the hell out of us, and Jim would put him on air, and then he'd let me come in and rebut.
Well, that's fair.
And reply. I wanted to do an on-air debate, but that one never happened.
All right, so you have the X26.
Yeah. And now let me show you. So this was the stock price we talked about before,
Yep.
right? Where it was like in 2001, it ran up and then it came back down.
So 1 second. So if you can't see this because you're listening to the podcast, it is a pretty cool, well, not cool, but it shoots up, the stock shoots up from when the IPO hits through September 11th. And then all of a sudden when it hits April, it just, of 02, it just craters.
Yeah,
The bottom drop.
It was June of 02.
June of 02, it really drops out. The
I
bottom.
remember that because that's when Congress passed the Federal Flight Deck Officers Act. All right. So remember this looks like a mountain.
Mountain, yep.
It's a mountain-shaped chart. Goes up and comes down. Let me show you the chart from 2 years later. Wow. Look at that. Now,
That's what you want to see.
yeah. And what you'll see, I'm going to point out here, that previous mountain looks like a tiny little blip because I'm now showing the stock chart through 2004. I'm going to erase Mike from the end so we can see how this shot up. And what you'll see is, that previous mountain is a tiny blip, and then it just takes off around June of 2003. And by the middle of 2004, we were up something like 3,000%. It was crazy. And then in the middle of 2004, it started bouncing around. That's when the controversy started. When we had been so successful, the company was taken off.
And taken off by, because if you look in the chart, does that correspond with the release of the X26? That's when you see it climbing the mountain again.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It started taking off. The X26 was a monster hit. In fact, there's an interesting story with the X26. So we were on track to launch it in May of 2003. We had scheduled our conference. We had bought the ads. We were ready to go. And we were doing our final human testing. And we tested against Hans Marrero,
who we had on episode 6.
Yep. And he did not go down. And we're like, oh shit. And so we dug into it. And what we discovered was in all of our testing, so we have some proprietary way we can tune very precisely how much muscle stimulation we get from a TASER. And we do this using anesthetized pigs so they don't feel any pain. But there are no great computer models about how the body reacts to electricity. You have to test it on live muscles. And what we realized was we had always tested on the pig. We would puncture the darts through the skin, or we would pull one dart out so that it would arc to the skin. And because the TASER had to work both arcing and with the darts in the skin. But what we had never done was tested both darts having to arc through the skin. And that's what we did when we tested with Hans Marrero. And frankly, me and Steve Tuttle and others, we were all getting ready to do our pre-release testing. And we taped the darts on the outside of our jeans. And when you do that, now the electricity had to arc twice through the skin.
Yep.
And what Max Nerheim, who we should have on the show, our most prolific inventor, Max went, we're studying to see what the hell just happened. Why did this behave so differently? It turns out that when the electricity has to arc through the skin, where that happens, there's a point of resistance. The skin gets, it just sort of resists the electricity. And we had enough power to do that once, but if you had to do it twice, it was extinguishing the arc, meaning before we could get that second half of the pulse energy through, the arc would shut off. We'd lose the arc, so we weren't getting all the electricity through. So to solve this, we had to redesign the whole weapon. Now we had to
again. This is before you're thinking you're about to launch.
This is like 6 weeks before launch, and we had to do a pretty big redesign. Now we didn't have to redesign the way it worked, but we just had to put more power in the arcing capacitors and do some other things. But basically what it did is we had designed this. We actually had plenty of room inside the weapon to assemble everything.
Mhm.
Now all the components got bigger, and now we are jamming stuff in there. So now you had to have these crazy wire runs. It became way more complex to assemble, and we knew like there was no way we were going to hit the launch date because we had to just make so many changes.
And when you say we had to make so many changes, just give us a idea, like how many people are working on this at this time in the history of the company?
Well, that's what's so funny now compared to back then. So no offense to my team now, but we have a huge team now.
Right.
And when we make cartridges, we make them by the millions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, when we launched the TASER 10 recently, just making the probe tip a few millimeters longer took like 6 months.
Yeah.
And the reason is because we have millions of dollars worth of automation equipment. And when one thing moves, you've got to go adjust all the equipment and then test. And it takes 6 months. Back then, we didn't have huge teams and we had no automation. These things were all made by hand. It was me cheering from the sidelines. We had 2 engineers, Max Nurheim doing electrical and this guy, Milan Sarovic, doing the mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 2 of them had to go in and redesign how this whole thing was going to fit together.
Incredible.
But I felt like the train has left the station. We've told the press, we've told some of the police magazines about this. We can't reschedule. And so that's where Matt McBrady, who I talked about before, who's on our board and who had helped me with the IPO, he came in and we had one of the most impactful decision meetings because I'm explaining to him, I think it was an actual board meeting, and I'm saying, so look, here's what we're going to do. The M26 was priced at $400. The distributors would buy it from us for $300. So we would make $300 on every M26.
Yep.
And on the X26, look, pricing is hard to figure out. It was going to cost us more to make it. And so we basically said, you know what, we're going to price it at $600. And then we'll leave 25% for the distributors.
Yep.
And I remember Matt McBrady coming in and challenging us and saying, well, wait a minute, if you can't make them, you should either not launch it or you should raise the price to deter people from buying because you need them to buy the old one.
Right.
And so we raised the price from $600 to $800, and we cut the distributor's percentage margin. So they were making 25% before, we cut it to 12.5%. And Matt's argument was, hey, they made $100 every time they sold an M26. They'd still make $100 every time they sell an X26. Right. So it's not like they're making less money, but we were trying to incentivize people to buy the old one. And then our plan was to bring the price down after we were in production. And then we would, have given some extra cartridges or some accommodation.
And so Matt he's an economist. So he's like, he's got this worked out.
He is an economist. And
did it work that way?
Well, here's what was interesting. So we went into the launch intentionally overpricing it. And basically it was, we launched and everybody complained. They said, look, the price is too high. Some expletive.
Yeah.
But damn it, I love it. We're going to buy it. And we were like, oh shit, like everybody is still buying this thing. And we couldn't, and then once we started shipping them, we couldn't make them fast enough. But I will tell you this, if we had not made that decision, we probably wouldn't be here today because we were about to get hit with a massive storm of litigation, lawsuits against the company that nearly put us under. And we only had enough resources to survive because if you think about that, with the old M26, we made $300 per TASER. With the M26, we made $700, right? Because they sold for $800, right. we kept $700. So it was more than twice the net revenue into us. And if we hadn't had that money, we probably would not have survived the storm that hit us in 2005. So
you give Matt credit for the initial idea, but it didn't play out exactly the way he thought it would, though.
Exactly.
And just curious on the distributors, like I get the math, even though math is not my specialty. As we've proven on prior podcast episodes, Like, but how did the distributors, which were vital to your business at the time, or vital to the business at the time, how did they react to that cut in percent that they were getting?
Well, they didn't love it. Although, look, we do, when we make decisions, today we call it win, right? We do really focus on trying to do things in a way that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Matt McBrady summed it up nicely. He said, look, our distributors, they aren't like grocery stores that buy a bunch of stock and put it on the shelf. For the most part, they're more like sales reps. They would go out and they would sell, and then they would just place orders. And usually we would even drop ship it, and then we'd pay them their profit margin. So his point was, hey, it's probably the same unit of effort to sell an M26 as an X26, and they're getting paid the same amount of money, even though we know it's a lower percentage. So at least it ticked the box. We felt, it did what we need in reducing we were trying to reduce the incentive to go to the new weapon. It did that, but it wasn't unfair.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'll tell you what did come from the M26 was, boy, were we successful. The growth just took off. We were tripling our revenue every year. We were growing at a 200% year over year annual rate. And we were named one of Fortune's fastest growing companies.
Yeah, what Rick has up on the screen now is from Fortune Small Business, the America's fastest growing company. It's got the X26 on there. I can't see what else it has. I can't see that far, but that's a pretty cool cover. That's a pretty cool magazine cover right there.
It was. This is when we went back in 2004. We did those pictures signing the NASDAQ. And over the next 2 years, we would go on to become the fastest growing company, the number one performing stock in the world. So I'm putting up a picture of the Wall Street Journal. This is from early 2005, where they looked at what were the best performing stocks in 2004. And I'm going to pull up you'll see here we won the best 3-year stock performance and the best 1-year stock performance. So we won in 2 categories.
Yep.
As the number one company in the
world.
world.
And go back to that other one. Go back to that. So this is 2004.
Yep.
And the market cap of the company is 1.77 billion, and your revenue is 67.7 million with a net income of 19.1. I mean, that felt pretty good at the time. Things are going well.
It did. I mean, we were turning in a 33% profit. And now look, some folks at the point might have said, well, maybe that's even too much profit. Are you raising your prices too much? I'm about to share with you, though, this is right before the storm. The storm clouds are gathering, and the storm clouds are about to hit.
And let me before the storm arrives. I mean, did you have an indication that there was a storm actually coming, or was it a complete surprise when this just starts hitting you?
We did start to get some warning. So just to finish this out, I do want to show you. Here's the actual rankings. This is sort of cool. Top Guns on the 1-year performance. It was TASER was number one, up 361% in a year, and on the 3-year, it was 202% per year, compounding annualized return.
That is amazing for sure. What's also amazing, I'm just looking at the other companies listed. One of them is Kmart Holdings. I don't even know if Kmart's still around anymore. And the other is a young fledgling company called Apple Computer. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. We crushed Apple that year. Good eyes, Mike. All right. So, yes, we did start to see storm clouds on the horizon. In fact, the first big story broke on July 18th of 2004. Now, Mike, I don't remember dates.
You do not remember dates.
So, but I remember this one because this was the night before my anniversary, which is July 19th.
Well, I'm glad you remembered your anniversary.
Yeah. And we got slammed by the New York Times. A reporter named Alex Berenson had come out. I spent like half a day with this reporter. One thing I've learned, these investigative reporters will come out and they blow a lot of smoke about how, they're coming to do a profile. And this thing was a complete hit piece. And he basically alleged we hadn't done any safety testing, that our products were secretly dangerous and were killing people. he famously put a picture of Dr. Robert Strapbucker,
And we
who's
talked
to this day one of the smartest guys I've ever met.
and we talked about him in a prior episode. He got hit because
He's an asparagus farmer.
and
What was the other part?
I mean he's a pig. I mean he's got
Oh,
pig.
and a pig farmer. Yeah. So Dr. Strapbucker lived on a farm, but faculty member, nuclear cardiologist, MD, PhD. But that didn't matter. I remember when Mark Kroll, who is going to be coming up soon on the pod.
I think that might be episode 9.
I remember Mark Kroll was at that point one of our board members, and he called me up and he said, "Rick, I think this New York Times piece is going to be a hit piece." And me, I tend to I'm pretty naive, I tend to trust people, and
I don't think you're naive. I think you're optimistic. Like you are eternally optimistic. So you're not naive.
Well, I didn't think this was going to be a hit piece, but then I remember after he said that, they sent out a photographer, and Strat called me, Dr. Stratbucker. He's like, "Oh yeah, they came out. It was great. We took some pictures out on the farm." And I'm like, "What do you mean pictures out on the farm?" He's like, "Oh yeah, they put me on my tractor, and I was showing them some of the asparagus we grow." And I was thinking, oh Lord,
here's your medical expert. Here's your chief scientist.
Yeah. And so I actually called Alex Berenson before the story ran, and I said, "Hey man, we're getting an inclination that this is not going to be a very fair piece."
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, if you guys take a picture of Strapbucker on a tractor and try to make him look like some hillbilly, that's just way out of line. And I remember him saying, "Well, I don't get to choose.
Mm-hmm.
That's the editor that's going to pick the photos and blah, blah, blah." So anyway, this piece hits, and it was very negative. In fact, let me show you the impact that this had here. Here's our stock price. That was when the New York Times hit. And you can see the stock had been running up, and bang, it gets cut in half.
It's like it's running up to the top of Mount Everest, and then it gets bam.
Yep. Actually, let me come back. There was one other piece that had hit before this, because I think this will be relevant for people to understand. Earlier that year, it was around April that the negative stories started. And it was Wyatt Andrews from CBS News came out and did an interview with me. And again, this was before I learned you can't give reporters 4-hour interviews. I was just excited.
Right. They want to talk to you.
They want to talk to us. What you learn is, though, they'll just wear you down.
Mm-hmm.
And so Wyatt Andrews came out, and he ran a negative piece about a guy who died in Colorado. And he basically kept pressing me to say this guy would have died anyways. It wasn't the taser's fault. And we had the autopsy on it. This gentleman, I don't mean to deprecate the guy, but he had taken a lethal dose of cocaine. He was 5 to 10 times the lethal level. It was very clearly a cocaine death.
Right.
But Wyatt Andrews had come out, and he kept asking me the same question over and over. "So you're saying he would have died anyways?" And I kept saying, "Well, what we're saying is..."
So you knew what he was trying to get you to do.
Well, I didn't really for sure.
Oh.
But I kept saying, "Look, what I'm saying is we have the autopsy. It shows very clearly 10 times the lethal dose of cocaine. There's a clear cause of death. It was not the taser." "Oh, you said he would have died anyways." So finally, I'm after the 10th time, I'm "Yeah, he would have died anyways." They showed that, of course, on the news, but they showed his mother then reacting to me. And look, if you're a parent,
Right.
It's very upsetting. And I looked like the world's biggest jerk the way they edited it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "How can he know that my son would have died anyways?" But here's the thing. They filmed her the day before they came and interviewed me. So they filmed her reacting to the answer they were going to plant in my mouth of me saying he was going to die anyway.
I mean, not to be political, but I mean, this is in a world way, 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 way before you would say #fake news. I mean, that is sort of journalistic malpractice right there.
I was really upset.
Yeah.
It's look, you didn't take my full answer that had all the context. You hammered at me until I said it in the short, pithy way that you wanted to, so you could edit it.
And you had
out
already
of
filmed
context.
her, and then they edited it together.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do you remember how when this came out versus the New York, how far apart?
Oh, yeah. You can actually chart it on the stock chart. You see that little blip earlier here.
Yep.
Right there. That blip was Wyatt Andrews. Every time. So that was the first negative news article. Now, that one didn't really have a huge impact. The New York Times had a much bigger impact. Now, what's interesting about this is there was an interesting human dynamic. I mentioned my dad and I bought this Lamborghini, and I hadn't really saved up the money to pay the taxes. It was going to come due the next year. We roll into 2003. So look, all of us had done pretty well. We were certainly doing way better financially than back in the day. You know,
when you were like back in the day when you were making payroll off of Steve Tuttle's Discover card. I still think about that story he told back in whatever episode 5 or 6. It cracks me up that Steve's like, hey, or your brother's like, hey, Steve, we need to close payroll.
Okay, so I just want you to imagine for a second, like this is a first world problem most people will have a very hard time relating to. But just imagine, so all of your money is tied up in this one stock. And yeah, you've made enough that, you know, everybody went out and they bought a decent house and a car and paid off our debt. So we were doing okay. But now it's starting to run and you see it going up that curve. And then we were in a blackout window there, which means when you're an insider at the company, you can't sell stock right before you announce earnings. So at the end of every quarter, you have to wait because you have information the rest of the world doesn't.
Yep.
And so as our stock was running up, we were in this blackout window. And a lot of us were like, hey, wow, this is life-changing amount of wealth. Like we're going from maybe having $1 million to like tens of millions of dollars.
From one Lamborghini to multiple Lamborghinis.
Yeah, and again, forgive me, these are first world problems, but hey, like let's talk as human beings, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, we're all like, wow, this is unbelievable. I can't wait to sell some. So like, I can take some off the table, or I can, you know, go spend it on something nice. It's sitting in this stock, and you can't sell it because you're in the window. Then this negative news story hits, and we had a board meeting afterwards, or a board call. And look, this was the first big negative news piece where people were saying that tasers were killing people and we were lying about it. So we knew the Department of Defense was working on a big study called the HECO, the Human Effects Center of Excellence. And for years, they had been studying the taser safety. There was, I think, a dozen research institutions and dozens of researchers, and they were nearly done with their report. And we knew their report was going to be really positive because, they'd been asking us questions all the way along. And we thought it was going to come out in April. And we said, okay, guys, the stock market is spooked. As insiders, we shouldn't sell because we kind of have this inside information that's frankly going to be helpful.
Yep.
When the world learns the Department of Defense says it's safe, it should put all these concerns to rest. So we looked around the table, all the insiders were not going to sell until the DOD releases that report. So now coming back to this, again, to give you, now you're on this emotional ride where the stock is going up, up, up. You get to June, it has now gone up something like from $2 or $3 up to like $30, right? You were up at least tenfold, maybe 20, 30, 50-fold, but you can't sell anything. And then the New York Times hits and the stock gets knocked in half. This thing is like a roller coaster. You're like, you're holding on. You're watching, like, we're insanely wealthy. Oh my God, we're losing it all. And you're kind of helpless. You're sitting there watching this, but we'd all agreed, like, we're waiting until the DOD. You don't know if, like, is this story going to, like, scare customers where they'll stop buying and maybe the stock goes down. Maybe the company gets ruined by all of this. And you're just helplessly watching.
And let me ask a dumb question. I mean, today, like, actually, you were looking at your watch, you get alerts about the stock market. Obviously, you check on your iPhone, see what the stock's doing. How are you doing it back then? Like, I can't even think about, like, we could see it minute by minute, right, or second by second. How are you looking at it then?
Well, back then the internet was a thing, so we would typically watch it like on Yahoo, Yahoo Finance. Which, by the way, there was a message board on there. And boy, it was TASER was like the stock of 2004.
Yeah.
It was running up. It was the number one in the world that year. There were these negative stories. Were all over the news media. And then the chatter, I mean, it was like a bloodbath between the bulls and the bears online, the people who loved TASER and those who hated us. We became a very polarizing stock.
And two questions. One, when this is after the New York Times article, or in the lead up in between the CBS article and the New York Times article, and then sort of the bottom falls out, how are customers reacting? How are your law enforcement customers reacting during this time?
So that was interesting. Our customers actually rallied around us. So that was pretty cool, because police are like, look, nobody writes nice stories about us.
Mm-hmm.
It almost created this bond together where they were like, welcome to the club. Like,
Right.
you guys are getting slayed.
Like you're part of the team now.
Yeah. You guys have kind of made it. You're getting hit now too. So even though our stock price was bouncing around all over the place, the sales kept going up 20% every quarter from the previous quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So if we did $1 million in sales one quarter, we'd do 1.2 million the next quarter, 1.5 million. The sales were continuing to go up, even though the stock was getting battered up and down all over the place.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, there was another hit piece that came out. I think it's by Reuters, which I never read. And, they thought they were just taking us apart as a company. And it actually, our recruitment numbers just shot through the roof. Like everyone, when the reporter thought he was doing something to take us down, it just showed what type of company we are. And we had people left and right trying to get a job at this company during that time.
Yep. But then something changed in December.
Tell us what that is.
The SEC. So we got hit with an SEC investigation. The allegations were that we lied about the safety of our products.
Right, before you move on to that chart, what's still up on the screen. So if you can't see it, it shows the New York Times article hits, the bottom drops out, and there's a blip, and then you go back, and you regain all of that, and it's actually trading above what it was when the New York Times article hit. So you were back up on top.
Yep. We hit an all-time high on December 31st of 2004. And that, by the way, was when my dad retired. And so he would go on for the next several years to give me shit and be like,
right,
what did you do to the stock, son? It was an all-time high the day I retired. And he left our board.
All right. So you regain, it's back to an all-time high, and then this happens.
Yeah. So basically, we had gotten hit with what I would call just the perfect storm of factors that came together, right? So you had fear of electricity, which is just, it's easy to scare people about tasers. So you had all the controversy of police uses. You had corporate success that, we were this top performing stock in the world. Police critics, look, if you hate the police, you hate us too.
Correct.
The media tends to be very left leaning. They tend to be inherently critical of police, and just that's the fact of life. The media is overwhelmingly left, and their job is to highlight controversy. Then you get this SEC investigation that kicks in. And I'm going to wait to come back to these other factors.
But at some other time, we are going to get to the naked shorts and some of the other factors.
Yes, we are. We might get there today, but let me come back. I want to talk about what happened between July 19th, my anniversary, which I missed because I was in crisis mode dealing with the New York Times.
But you at least knew the date of your anniversary. I'm proud of you for that.
Yeah, I remember when I crawled in bed, my wife was asleep. She rolled over and she said, "Happy anniversary." And I was like, oh God, I'm sorry. And you've met my wife. She is just fantastic. There was not a hint. She didn't say it to be mean or anything else. It was, I just felt like such an ass.
I love your wife. She puts up with a lot. That's all I can think in dealing with you. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, she does.
All right. So the SEC.
So now we're getting through the summer, and now the stock is down. We're all a bit panicked, but our customers are still buying.
Right.
And we come through the third quarter. So when you're a public company, you report every 90 days. Now, again, you can't sell shares for the last 2 or 3 weeks of the quarter because you kind of know how it's going to be. And so you have to now wait because you know how the quarter is going to be. Then you get through. So maybe from September 10th through the end of September, you can't sell. Then it takes a month
to close the
books and all that. And so you get into like the third, fourth week of October before you could sell. Our financial results were insane. I remember my then chief financial officer, Dan Barrett, when he came to show me the results, he said, Rick, it's an embarrassment of riches.
Wow.
Like we're making 54% operating income. Like more than half of every dollar is falling to the bottom line. And we're generating, I think we generated over $10 million in cash. I mean, that's as much as we made in the IPO in a quarter.
In a quarter.
And the DOD was finally going to release their report. And those two things hit the third week of October. The DOD puts out its press release. And which, by the way, we put out a press release. The DOD doesn't typically do a press release, but they had worked with us to approve a press release, and we were allowed to release a copy of their report.
That's pretty unbelievable.
And the headline said, "Tasers are generally safe and effective." It then went on to talk about how they looked at it, but it said there may be some populations who are at risk, like pregnant women and elderly people, and more studies are needed. Which, by the way, the researchers told me, you never publish anything without saying more research is needed. That's what you do for a living. You need more research. So we put out that, and this press release was approved by Captain Dan McSweeney at the DOD. Dude, you remember these things? Because this was the middle of the storm.
Right.
The DOD approves the press release. We put that out, and then we announce our results. I can't remember. One went, they were within like a day of each other. And our financial results were off the charts.
And just one second. So you're crushing it in terms of sales. Customers love you. And is it X26? You only have one product at the time. We have one X26 and legacy with M26. That's it, though, right?
Yep, that's it. We were a one-hit wonder, which kind of made us a good target. So if I come back here, I'm back in the stock chart. You can see after the New York Times, for about a quarter, the stock stayed low. And then, boom, we announced our earnings here in October, and the stock runs back up. And guess what?
You're high-fiving each other.
We are, and we're like, hey, the blackout is lifted. We all said we weren't going to sell shares until the DOD is done. The DOD releases out. And so, look, everybody was like, this is harrowing. I want to take some money off the table.
Right.
I can't just keep watching go up and down. And so insiders, meaning like me, my dad, my brother, Kathy, our CFO, other reporting officials, together sold about $68 million worth of stock. I mean, look, it's an offensively large amount of money to some people. But when it happens to you, you're like, after 7, 8, 10 years of slaving away at it, it was like, this is a huge reward. And we all breathed this sigh of relief. We
took money off the table.
Well, we thought the controversy was over too. The Department of Defense has spoken. It's generally safe and effective.
Yep.
Lo and behold. So a couple weeks later, I see Alex Berenson, the reporter from the New York Times, at a conference, and he decides to take a taser hit. And so I hook him up, tape the 2 darts on him, hit him with a taser. He goes down. I'm thinking, hey, maybe he's coming around.
Right.
Sometime in November, he puts out another article. And this time, he basically accused us of stock fraud. Front page of New York Times. The story basically said, Taser safety claims challenged.
This guy's got it in for you.
Yeah.
Wait, so you see, like...
Oh, whoops. Now, this was not the July 19th. This is now November. This is the story that got us a federal investigation. So previously, he'd hit us in July.
Right.
Now he's back in November, and his story goes something like this. Taser, that was the name of the company back then, Taser put out a press release saying that its weapons are safe and effective. Insiders sold $68 million worth of stock. But now a New York Times investigation has revealed the lab that did the study said there may be some populations at increased risk and more studies are needed.
More research is needed.
The same 2 disclaimers we had in our press release. And the world went nuts. Every newspaper in America picked this up. And the story was, we lied to pump up the stock price so all the insiders could sell. And the New York Times caught us because more studies needed. There might be vulnerable people.
Wow.
And I remember, I felt like in Zoolander. I don't know if you remember Mugatu. Like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why is this news? They spun the body of our press release against the headline. Like, it was all in our press release, and they're making it sound controversial. And of course, bang, our stock is bouncing around. Then around a week or two later, we got a call from a firm called Gradient Analytics. Now, when you're a public company, there are research firms that will do research on you, and they publish research notes. And that's a lot of how investors will try to figure out like which stock to buy. They read these research notes. And I'd never heard of Gradient Analytics. And my dad came in pissed. He was like, Rick, I think there's a short attack on us. Short sellers are coming after us.
So he knew.
And I'm like, Dad, hold on. Now, let me explain for everybody what a short seller is, because we haven't talked about this yet. Normally, when you invest in a stock, you buy low and you sell high. So everybody wants the stock to go up. Short sellers, they're doing something very different. They sell shares before they buy them. So let me explain. So let's say, Mike, you own 1 million shares of TASER, and I am a hedge fund that wants to short the stock because I believe the stock's going to go down. And maybe I even want the stock to go down. All right, so you've got 1 million shares, and I'm a hedge fund, and I think it's going to go down. I say, hey, can I borrow your 1 million shares? I'm good for it. I'll give them back to you. You say, okay. I borrow the shares. I go sell them. Let's say the stock's at $100. Now, I owe you 1 million shares back. If the stock goes down to 50, I buy it back for 50. I give you your shares.
Yep.
I made 50 million bucks because I sold for 100 and then I bought back at 50. So you make money when it goes down. Now, the thing about short,
But I just get 1 million shares back.
Yeah, you just get your shares back.
But they've already been cut in half. The price has been cut in half.
Right. But you don't, it's the same thing as far as you know. And in fact, if you have a margin account, you might be loaning shares out today. When you have a margin account where you can borrow money against your stock, the banks will loan your shares out. You won't even know it. And they'll make money. They charge interest for loaning shares out.
Yep.
And when shares are in high demand, banks will charge a lot of money for that.
Is it, I mean, it is kind of complicated to understand. I mean, seems like a short seller is betting against that stock, betting against that company.
For sure. That's exactly what they're doing. Now, the thing about short selling, it is an extremely risky bet because, like, let's say I borrowed your shares and I short sold them. So 1 million shares, I sold them for $100, right? So I made $100 million. But what if that stock goes to 1,000?
Yep. And they're on the hook.
They're on the hook. Like, you have unlimited downside. You could lose 10 times, 100 times what you put in. Normally, when you buy a stock, you can only lose as much as you've put in.
Right.
Short selling, you have unlimited losses. And so one of the things that I've learned along the way is your grandmother is not shorting stocks in her IRA.
No.
The people who do this are sharks. They're aggressive hedge funds. And what they've learned is you don't stand around and wait for bad things to happen. You make bad things happen. So it's well known. Short sellers will hire private investigators to go after companies, management to try to plant stories. And generally speaking, the SEC is fine with that because they're like, well, you know what? They're like vultures that find dying animals. Like, if they find bad companies, and look, in a lot of ways, there's actually this unholy alliance where short sellers can become allies. If you're a mid-level investigator at the Security Exchange Commission, right? You want to get promoted. How do you get promoted? You find bad companies and you go after them. Well, if you have big hedge funds with billions of dollars and teams of investigators, and they're bringing you cases, you're like, hey, this is actually good. They're going to help me rise because I'm going to get more prosecutions.
And in defense of short sellers, which I'm not defending, but I guess they would say they're helping to root out malfeasance that, like Enron and others, and they're the ones that are really protecting the market.
There is some truth, and that can happen. But the problem is short sellers can also do, frankly, what happened to us, which is where they're creating negative energy. Like, it's much easier to burn down a house than to build it.
Exactly.
And these fuckers tried to burn my house down, and they almost succeeded. So here's what happens. Gradient Analytics is talking to my dad. Remember, he was still chairman of our board, and he did some of our investor relations. And he's like, these guys are crazy. They're saying that they're going to give us an F in financial performance, which they did. So the quarter we just announced, 54% operating income, like $10 million cash flow positive on a 20 million revenue quarter.
Crazy numbers.
Like crazy good numbers. And these guys give us an F for financial performance. Well, long story short, years later, analysts from Gradient Analytics would go on to admit they were paid by short sellers to write hit piece reports.
Wow.
To go out to try to manipulate the stock price down. And there was some other stuff, but it's not worth getting into. There was a number of things that were in that Gradient report that were just completely bogus.
So this report comes out.
So the report comes out, and my dad's like, Rick, there's short sellers coming after us. And I'm like, Dad, you're being paranoid. Calm down. Like, these guys, maybe they just don't like us. Maybe they're cop haters or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows that they're being paid by short sellers. Then on Christmas Eve, December 24th, in comes a fax from the Securities and Exchange Commission. It didn't actually say Merry Christmas, but on Christmas Eve it said
It comes in on Christmas Eve.
of the 24th. And it says, do not destroy any documents related to the safety of your products and a sale to some of your larger distributors. You are now under an informal inquiry of the SEC, which is a nice way of saying they're investigating you. Don't destroy any documents.
Wow.
Merry Christmas. It's like, oh shit. And then a week later, we got another fax up confirming, yep, you are under an informal inquiry.
Mm.
I think the first one was a document preservation request. The second letter between Christmas and New Year's was...
So I assume you're on the phone Christmas Day, though, after you got that letter to the rest of the company.
Yeah, the technical term is we're shitting Twinkies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for anybody who's never been under a federal investigation, it is scary as hell.
Right. Not like it's a common occurrence that you've been through before.
Well, and we'd been accused of stock manipulation, that we'd lied, pumped, and dumped the stock by the New York Times. Clearly, I believe that's what was leading to this investigation. The SEC, like they read about on the front page of the New York Times, hey, maybe we should investigate this.
Right.
So then, we're scrambling, hiring attorneys, figuring out what we need to do. And then right after New Year's, we get a call from the Arizona Republic. And my brother takes the phone call. And they say, hey, we'd like to talk to you about this informal inquiry from the SEC.
So somebody leaked it.
And I remember Tom coming to me going, I said, Tom, did they ask about the investigation? He said, no, they asked about the informal inquiry. Somebody leaked them this information. And we're like, oh, shit. What do we do? And so we actually called the SEC. We're like, hey, we want to be cooperative. We want to help you guys out. We want to help you get through this investigation. But look, somebody leaked this. And now this is going to be in the newspaper. Like, what do we do? Because Tom had hung up. He didn't answer the question. And the SEC says, well, it wasn't us. Like, we're, a professional organization.
Can't do that. We would never do
and
that.
by the way, I don't think they did leak.
Right.
We later found out how it happened. They said, but look, we can't give you any legal advice, but you probably shouldn't lie. We're like, yeah, okay. And then we called our lawyers and they said, yeah, you can't lie. And so actually on our lawyer's advice, we went in, it was around January 7th. We put out a press release to get ahead of it and said, TASER has been notified that we are under an informal inquiry from the SEC. And again, I'm going to go back and put that stock chart up where once that happened, the stock went down.
Might take my face off the screen as
There we go.
much as I don't want that to happen, but
And you can see it went down and it stayed down. It went from $33 a share down to $7 and then eventually drifted down over the next 6 months to $5. Now, what happened with this time that was different, our customers stopped buying. When it was just a bad news and a headline, they could deal with that. But I remember talking to big agency customers and they were saying things like, hey man, I can't go to my city council.
the federal investigation.
You guys are under a federal investigation. I can't buy your stuff until you get this cleared up.
So it's a lot different than, you're in the same boat as your police customers who probably don't trust the media anyway. Now you're a part of the team. When you're in a federal investigation, they're not going to do a contract with you.
That's 100% right. And so this time it was different. And now our sales dropped 50% overnight. I mean, you could see we actually printed out later the daily sales numbers.
Yep.
You could see the day this story hit, boom. The only agencies that kept buying were like repeat customers buying supplies and really small agencies that didn't have to deal with much local politics. Every major agency stepped on the sidelines.
And so who leaked it. You don't want to get into that?
We will. I think we're getting to the end of this episode.
Yeah.
I'm next going to share with you all the behind the scenes. Boy, this was
at another
this was
episode.
Not,
we're going to do this.
Yeah, this was not a coincidence. This was a highly coordinated short seller attack. At that time, there was over $1 billion bet short against Axon. And in retrospect, you could see this was a well-coordinated negative press campaign together with likely investigators that were hired privately, sending reports to the government to instigate an investigation. We had a mole inside the company, somebody who was being paid by short sellers to do this. And it shook my faith both in humanity, and we were not sure we would survive. This should have killed any normal company. We should not have survived. We had one product, the TASER. It was highly controversial. We only sold it to government customers. And whoever attacked us, I still don't know to this day, it was brilliant. We were the perfect victim. If they could spook our customers into thinking our product was deadly, they could drive our sales down. If they could spook, or if they could cause a government investigation, that in and of itself would throttle our sales. And it should have created a downward spiral where the dropping sales become a self-reinforcing message that we had lied or done something previously to cook the books, right? Because it's now spiraling downward. But we didn't die. We came out of this stronger.
I was going to say it only made you stronger.
It only made us stronger. This is why body cameras exist, because we had to defend ourselves and our customers around all the god-awful things they were accusing us of doing. And today, we had an all-time stock high at $788 a share, $60 billion. So to any entrepreneurs out there struggling, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But sometimes it kills you. So make sure you survive.
Incredible. I mean, that is incredible. And it's almost like leaving our listeners and viewers on a little bit of suspense, because we need to hear the rest of the story, which we'll cover in another podcast episode. We obviously know you survived and the company survived.
We're going to do the whodunit, but you're going to have to wait a few weeks, because next up, we're going to dig into the science and the safety behind all of this. And I'm going to respond to our newest hit piece, if I may be so blunt in its characterization, from John Oliver, where we're going to go through and set the record straight.
But before we end, like we did in episode 7, we do an AMA. You can ask us questions. If you follow me on X at Mike Wagers, or you follow Rick or I on LinkedIn, we'll drop the link in there where you can ask us questions. Why don't we just take one or two? I know we're short on time, Rick, but let's take one or two, and then we'll end episode 8. So as CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, you can say how you overcame obstacles and slow starts. Now that you're successful, what keeps you up at night?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I actually sleep pretty well at night now, because back in the day, like, look, when this was going on, I'm wondering, is my company going to survive? Am I going to end up in prison? Like, if people believe this stuff and the company tanks, that was just a terrifying time. We have now built a diversified company where we do everything from VR to cloud software, artificial intelligence, body cameras, drones, in-car cameras. So we have a very diversified program. I guess the main thing I would say that keeps me up at night now is that we're going to turn into a sucky big company and get disrupted by some other group of young, struggling entrepreneurs. They're going to come kick our ass. That's what keeps me up at night, that we'll be fat and happy and slow moving and become a big company.
The innovator's dilemma. I think we'll stop on that question. But the one thing we forgot on the last episode, to show how smart I am, Rick did not know how many members of Congress there were. I said there were 435 members in the House, and obviously in the Senate, there's 2 per state, so that's 2 times 50 makes 100. So we asked producer Dylan and Mark, who's behind us, to research that. We never came back to you. Am I correct in my number?
You are.
Producer Dylan, did you look that up? Okay, this is a podcast, so you have to like speak loudly, at least so you can hit the, we can hear you. Do we? So
Everybody knows you won, Mike. Mike for the political and math win, all in one shot.
all right. Well, the way we're gonna end this today, Rick, is the way we started it, with a Batman theme. So we thank all our listeners and viewers, and we hope they go to Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or however they get their podcast, and not just view and listen to this episode and our prior episodes. We hope they subscribe. And we, just like they used to say in the old Batman show, we'll be back here, same bat time, same bat channel, very soon.
In the Batcave.
Take care.
In the shadows of a volcano broadcasting bold, talking to Kramer, stories of villainy retold. From an IPO to highs and lows we know, heroes born in fire, riding storms they grow. Trading dreams for Lamborghinis, then the taxes came knocking. Laughing now, but back then, every heartbeat felt like dropping. Boldly go through the fire, through the storm. Stand tall through the rise, through the fall. Boldly go in the face of every fear. Turn the darkest nights into something clear. Shaped pulse of new delight, electric dreams sparking innovation's flight. Price and wars, decisions made in haste. Customers complained but couldn't resist the taste. From critics to believers, from headlines to the heat, controversy brewing, but we would not retreat. Oh, boldly go through the fire, through the storm. Stand tall through the rise, through the fall. Boldly go in the face of every fear. Turn the darkest nights into something clear. Yes, CC knocking, Christmas Eve surprise, leaks and rumors swirling, truth buried in lies. Short sellers plotting, secrets running deep. Stock prices falling, promises to keep. Fear gripping tight, sales took a dive, but our spirit stayed strong, fighting to survive. Yo, boldly go through the fire, through the storm. Stand tall through the rise, through the fall. Boldly go in the face of every fear. Turn the darkest nights into something clear. Short sellers, hidden plots, investigations drawing near. The truth is tough and courage pure. We overcome the fear. Standing in the aftermath, stronger from the fight. Dano reaching gloom and now reaching greater heights. Body cams and drones, AI in the sky. Learning from each challenge, dreaming